Look at the time. It's time for Popok Live After Dark. On the most recent episode, I talk in detail about an 80-page motion filed by Donald Trump to try to vacate the jury conviction against him in New York on the 34 felony counts because he got elected president. Is that going to work? Why is it 80 pages? And why is it just like warmed over leftovers from prior arguments, all that failed? I cover it in detail, one place, the Midas Touch Network and Legal AF. Here's a clip. Let's go with what just get filed. And let me just do a little bit of housekeeping and a disclosure. I am mentioned, along with Michael Cohen, on page, I think it's 16 of the new filing here by Donald Trump's lawyers as a basis or as evidence that Michael Cohen has an axe to grind against Donald Trump, and therefore his witness testimony in the Stormy Daniels case should be thrown out, and the conviction should be thrown out along with it. Apparently, that was the comments they're referring to is the day I appeared with Michael Cohen on a show. So it said, Cohen, Popok, explain it all. And I'm cited in there. It's been quite a 2 weeks for me. 2 weeks ago, I was on Russian television. Yes, Russian television, not by choice. They played a hot take of mine from Legal AF about Boris Epstein's role within the Trump organization in picking lawyers. They ran a story about Trump, and there I was with a snippet untranslated of me on Legal AF, the podcast, or Legal AF, the YouTube channel. That was just 2 weeks ago. And now I'm in the Trump filing on the motion to dismiss. Midas Touch Network and Legal AF. If we don't report on the news, we make it. That's our new motto. All right, let's get back to the filing. What's it all about? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I reported that Donald Trump asked Judge Merchan in the Stormy Daniels case to give him time to file a motion to dismiss in the interest of justice because he had just been elected president. And as president-elect, he had all sorts of what he claimed to be powers and defenses and separation of powers. And he's president-elect, and there's transition things that will be interfered with all of this, and just throw out the conviction. Okay. I said earlier that the judge is not doing that. Okay, a jury of Donald Trump's peers, whether he likes it or not, after a 6 or 8 week trial, has spoken. They heard all the witnesses. Donald Trump had an opportunity to testify. Many people that work for the Trump organization testified against Donald Trump. Everybody involved in the conspiracy except Donald Trump testified, and he got convicted. There's no other way to put it. He's got 36 felony counts. And just because they are, like a baby in a high chair or throwing whatever they can against the wall doesn't mean the judge has to listen to it. This what just got filed, 80 pages or so, wouldn't even work as an appellate grounds. Now, any of these issues they've raised, Michael Cohen is biased. The prosecutors are biased. The judge's daughter works for Democratic entities in fundraising. All these other ridiculous things. They're all, if you think you have an appeal, and you think you can get these issues reversed on appeal, then bring it. But this isn't, our guy just got elected president again, so he gets jackpot, it's a cherry, jackpot, everything goes away. They wrote a letter to the Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, telling her she had to dismiss and vacate her $450 million judgment for civil fraud because Donald Trump just got elected president. What does it have to do with his pre-president fraudulent conduct that he's had to repay to the people of New York? What does that have to do with anything? And what does him getting elected have to do with crimes that he did and the cover-up he did before he was president in 2016? As I've said before, the Stormy Daniels hush money cover-up interference in 2016, all of that happened. The cover-up happened before he was president. That's what he was trying to cover up, that he was having sex with women outside of his marriage or worse. And that's but the payback of some of it happened after he was president. That's not the crime. The crime is the conspiracy to catch and kill the news stories around it, and not the payback later through Michael Cohen after Donald Trump was in the presidency, writing in his personal memoir and his personal checkbook to pay back this personal debt. Okay. So they don't like that. So first they take on Alvin Bragg. Well, very first thing they do, I'm going to read to you here, is that they go after the Hunter Biden development. Here's what they say, how Hunter Biden is possibly related. This is not the feds. This is the state. This has to do with pre-presidential conduct by Donald Trump. Yesterday, they say on page 1, in issuing a 10-year pardon to Hunter Biden that covers any and all crimes, whether charged or uncharged, President Biden asserted that his son was selectively and unfairly prosecuted and treated differently. He was. President Biden argued that raw politics has infected this process and led to a miscarriage of justice. This is in a memo accompanying the pardon, which, by the way, Biden didn't have to write. All he had to do was pardon the guy, but he wrote the memo. These comments amounted to an extraordinary condemnation of President Biden's own DOJ. This is the same DOJ that coordinated and oversaw the politically motivated election interference witch hunts targeting President Trump. Well, if there were supposed to be election interference witch hunts, they failed miserably because Trump got elected. What does this have to do with anything? I mean, this is a state prosecution. Here it is. Matt Colangelo used to work for the Department of Justice and became a special prosecutor along with Alvin Bragg in New York. I mean, it's so attenuated. There's so little connective tissue here, but that's where we have. Then they got to go after Alvin Bragg. Alvin Bragg was busy going after Trump instead of going after violent crime in New York. I don't even know what he's talking about at this point. I live in New York. I'm in New York right now. I mean, crime rate has gone down considerably since COVID under Alvin Bragg and under the law enforcement and police in this country. But we got to do a political screed here in the middle of his motion. Then they got to go after just wrong. They keep saying Alvin Bragg campaigned to run for office, to run for the Manhattan DA, which is an elected position on the campaign platform that he was going to go after Donald Trump. That's a lie. That is a lie. Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, ran on a platform that she was going to go after Donald Trump in her own way, if that's where her investigations led. Alvin Bragg was asked once on stage during a debate whether he would go after Donald Trump, and he said, if there's crimes to go after, I'll go after. The office he was taking over, the Manhattan DA, was already in the throes of an investigation for years by Alvin Bragg's predecessor, Cy Vance. He was already in the midst of investigations about tax fraud, which he successfully convicted. They leave that out. They leave that out that Alvin Bragg also got a 19-count felony conviction against the Trump Organization for tax fraud and business record fraud 2 years ago, involving the same people like Alan Weisselberg, the disgraced chief financial officer for Donald Trump, who went to jail. They leave that out conveniently. Just throw out the conviction of the jury because Alvin Bragg's a bad guy and Cohen perjured himself. The jury evaluated Michael Cohen's 3 days of testimony. They weren't watching his podcast. They weren't watching me on his podcast. I mean, maybe now they are, but they weren't then. They had plenty of time to cross-examine them on this. They picked a jury. They asked the jury, where do you get your news from? We were upset. We thought they should have asked, do you get your news from Midas Touch? They didn't ask that question. They could have asked that question. They obviously know who Legal AF and Midas Touch are. But they didn't ask it during the jury selection process. Who's that on? That's on them. Now, let me just remind you who the them is in this story. The two lawyers that filed this piece of paper, one is Todd Blanche, the other is Emile Beauvais. They're partners. You know what they're going to be doing in about a month after they get confirmed? Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Assistant to the Deputy Attorney General for the United States. Donald Trump put his entire criminal defense team, private lawyers, into the government. They're supposed to be the people's lawyer. How are they going to be the people's lawyer? They're still on the payroll of Donald Trump in any event. Then they make a big deal out of something you may have forgotten about. Mark Pomerantz. Let me bring him up for a moment because it's in this briefing. Mark Pomerantz, particularly, was a special prosecutor, was not inside the Manhattan DA's office. Special prosecutor, along with Carrie Dunn, another one, who got brought in by Alvin Bragg's predecessor, Cy Vance, to evaluate things related to Trump. He was convinced that they should go after Trump for tax evasion. They should go after Trump for all sorts of things, including the Stormy Daniels case. When the election happened and Cy Vance got elected, they made a pitch to their new boss. And Alvin didn't like the case. He didn't like the case originally. He didn't like how much it relied on Michael Cohen, and he didn't want to bring that case. He liked the case of tax fraud better. And Mark Pomerantz, God bless him, he didn't like the fact that he was being rejected. And so he quit noisily by writing a letter to the New York Times. And then he wrote a book called The People versus Trump. And he sold a few copies. And then he got dragged before the Republican Oversight and Judiciary Committee by MAGA. And then he took, who knows why, he took the Fifth Amendment, which is the weirdest thing. He took the Fifth Amendment against criminal prosecution and didn't answer any questions. I mean, Mark Pomerantz did not cover himself with glory. And of course, front and center is Mark Pomerantz. Mark Pomerantz knew it was a bad case. Mark Pomerantz wasn't the prosecutor. Mark Pomerantz didn't know how a year or two later, Alvin Bragg's team developed the evidence in the case. He'd already left the office. That'd be like me commenting on the strength of the case for the prosecutors based on things I don't know about, as opposed to what's in the public domain. But of course, they're gonna get mileage and throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. Now let's do Mark Pomerantz. Now let's do the crime spree in New York. What does that have to do with anything? Oh, there were leaks. Oh, your daughter, Judge, earns a living. She has a job. Yeah, okay. And you're biased somehow. They've raised the bias of the judge now 4 different times. All have failed. Now look. I could go on with all these arguments. There's no victims. They stole the money, but they paid it back in time. So there's no victims. This is sort of the argument in all of this. There's no victims with Stormy Daniels. You know who was victimized? This was books and records combined with election fraud. This was fraudulent books and records to how they recorded the Stormy Daniels payment, combined with the fact of why they did it, which was to hide the payments from the American people to commit election fraud and tax fraud. That's called fraud. Business record fraud is a fraud in New York. I'm sorry. It's the business capital of the world. You're going to jail for it. So this is going to be filleted. It's going to be a vivisection, by the Manhattan DA's office in response. Their response is that I think in a week, and that's it. And then let me make a prediction. The judge is going to deny this. He's going to deny this. They can take it up on appeal to the First Department Court of Appeals in New York, which is the first level of Court of Appeals. They'll lose there. Then they can take it up to the Court of Appeals for New York, which is the highest court in New York. And I think this whole thing plays out through the beginning of 2025. Again, he's not going to get sentenced. I want to make this clear. Donald Trump he's going to occupy the office, and 4 years from now, he's going to get sentenced. And hopefully at that time, he's going to spend a couple years in jail. But that is a 2029 event, just to be clear. Welcome back. I distilled 80 pages into a relatively concise and punchy analysis about what just got filed. I do it in one place, the Midas Touch Network, well, 2, and Legal AF, the YouTube channel. Glad you're here to be a part of our audience. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button. Join me every Tuesday night on Popok Live on the Midas Touch Network. And also we've got, of course, the Midas Touch Legal AF podcast on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and a whole channel devoted to the intersection of law and politics that you're already on. So until my next Legal AF and Popok Live, I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.